And now, the Rink Rap podcast from Forever Blueshirts, talking all things New York Rangers hockey. Here's your host, Jim Cerny.
What's up, Blueshirts faithful? Welcome to the latest edition of the Rink Rap podcast. I am Jim Cerny. Thanks for coming to hang out with us today, and thanks for liking and subscribing here at the podcast. Following us on YouTube, of course, and Odyssey and Apple, and however you digest your podcast, whether it's audio only or whether you're like looking at us, especially when we're at Mustang Harry's, but we're not there this week. Watching us on YouTube. Love it. Love your support. Appreciate it. Even as the season winds down here, we're not winding down. We got a lot of Rangers coverage, a lot of topics to hit, week after week, really day after day, which is what we do over at foreverblueshirts.com, our website. But, the podcast is going to be running all summer long, all off season long. We'll be hitting up the prospects, talking trades, whatever moves Rangers make, dive into the rumors, talk to a lot of the experts, certainly get into the draft as we get closer to that, free agency on July 1 and, everything else that takes place over the course of the NHL offseason. We're here for you. We're not going anywhere. Rangers may be done by Wednesday of this week, Wednesday night before midnight in Tampa Bay. When the clock strikes midnight, their season's done. Second straight out of the playoffs for the Rangers. They'll be done, though, more importantly, the more important work for them begins really in the offseason anyway, as they really kick the retool into high gear. So we're going to be there, right there with them. As I said, going through the rumors, going through the news, the analysis. We'll do the post-mortem, on this season. Certainly want to hear what players have to say after breakup day. So we'll be doing a pod right after breakup day as well. There's always some information that comes out of that. And to that end, one of the topics I want to get to on the podcast today, and it's really going to be a 2-topic podcast. It's not going to be a super long one this week, or at least today, because we might do another one later in the week, depending on when breakup day is. But it's pretty much going to be a 2-topic podcast. So not too long. We're not going to belabor the points. But one of the topics, the second one that we'll get to after the break, is about Vincent Trocheck and his future here with the Rangers, because that is really the big decision that the Rangers have to make this offseason, and maybe the linchpin to what their retool looks like once they reconvene at training camp next September. So, we'll get to Vinnie Trocheck in just a little bit. But I said it's a 2-topic podcast this week. And certainly the main topic is Jonathan Quick announcing his retirement from the National Hockey League and then playing his final game on Monday in Florida at Amerant Bank Arena, the 3-2 loss to the Florida Panthers. And, obviously I have a whole bunch of thoughts here. And hopefully you read my column, What's Next for the New York Rangers after Jonathan Quick announces his NHL retirement. That really delves into, and I'm going to hit on a lot of these, subtopics, if you will, in the pod today. I really try and hit on what is next for the Rangers. What does their goaltending situation look like with Jonathan Quick out of the picture? Even though we all kind of figured that this was it for him, looked like he was done this season. I don't mean that disrespectfully. I don't say it flippantly. This is a guy that played 18 years in the NHL, battles his ass off, is tremendously well-respected, within that Rangers dressing room, just as he was in Vegas, just as he was in Los Angeles, and respected around the league. You saw it. I mean, the Florida Panthers waiting on the ice after the game was over on Monday night, waiting on the ice. And Sergei Bobrovsky sends a message through Vlad Gavrikov to go back into the dressing room and ask Jonathan Quick to come back out. So the crowd could give him one last ovation. And also so the Panthers could congratulate him on a hell of a career. Total classy move by Paul Maurice and the Florida Panthers. And certainly by Sergei Bobrovsky, who seemed to be one of the driving forces behind this. He was the first guy that met Jonathan Quick when he came back out on the ice, came out of the chute. And it was a cool moment. It was a really cool moment. It tells you a lot about the league. These guys battled head to head over the years for their respective teams and different teams along the way, but battled, head to head against each other, were two of their best. They were in their primes together, in the National Hockey League. Bobrovsky's just 3 years, I think, 2.5 years younger than Jonathan Quick. They went head to head in the Olympics as well. Quick for the United States, Bobrovsky, for Russia. And to see Bobrovsky and Quick long embrace, to start that congratulatory line of Florida Panther players, long embrace and kind of talking to each other, just a one-on-one conversation. It was great meets great. Great appreciates great, right? Because listen, Bobrovsky is great. I know he hadn't a good year, but he's great. And he's a 2-time champion. And a champion knows a champion. And hey, Jonathan Quick is a 3-time Stanley Cup champion. And it probably on his way to the Hockey Hall of Fame. I would say definitely, but I'll say probably. You never know how the voting goes in these things. But to me, he's a Hockey Hall of Famer for what he's accomplished. The all-time winningest goalie, United States-born winningest goalie in NHL history, 12th all-time on the goalie list with 410 victories. The Stanley Cup titles in 2012 and 14 with the Kings when he was the number one, and then winning one as a backup with the Vegas Golden Knights as well, and what he did for the New York Rangers these past 3 seasons as well, both on and off the ice. As a leader, we talk about how respected Jonathan Quick is. Part of it is, sure, you respect the championships. You respect the great play on the ice. You respect the competitive nature that he plays with. Like, he's a beast out there, or was a beast out there. Even this season, when the Rangers cratered and his own game cratered, let's face it, in January, he was still fighting. You saw him going after opponents, getting pissed, fiery guy. Yeah, he had all that, and you respect that. But it was also what he did behind the scenes. How he brought guys together, events, having teammates over to his place where, he and his family live in Connecticut, creating team gatherings, and just being a veteran voice of reason and leadership. Rangers are going to miss all of that from Jonathan Quick. I take it back to 2024, right? This was the best the Rangers got out of Jonathan Quick after they signed him in the offseason in 2023. This was the best of his 3 seasons, no question. And not coincidentally, it was the best Ranger season that he was a part of as well. But when Igor Shesterkin struggled in that season, remember, Igor had a big dip in his play during that season. And Quick was playing really well as his number 2, which was a surprise at the time. Remember, he was coming off a down year, even though he won the Cup that previous spring. He was coming off a down year. That's why Los Angeles traded him. They were in transition. He wasn't playing great. He was okay with Vegas, but he ended up being their number 3 goalie in the postseason. Anyway, so, he was playing well for the Rangers, and Igor, had a dip in his play right around the All-Star break, if you remember. And Quick stepped in and played some terrific hockey for the Rangers, allowed Shesterkin to, out of the game's glare, was able to work on his game with goaltending coach Benny Hilaire at the time. And Igor came back, was roaring down the stretch, and was back to being Igor. And he just needed that break, though. And that's why a veteran backup goalie that you trust is so valuable. And that's what Jonathan Quick did for the Rangers that year. Whenever he was called upon, he was aces. He was outstanding that first season on Broadway. And it was a great story, grew up a Ranger fan in Connecticut. This was his dream to play for the Rangers. Mike Richter was, his idol growing up. All cool stuff. Great story. But most importantly, he delivered on the ice. And his presence and his success on the ice helped, Igor reclaim his spot, as a great goalie in the NHL. Of course, Igor was aces then in the postseason, and was the most important reason why the Rangers advanced to the conference final. Not that others didn't contribute, but listen, he was the backbone, of that team. Jonathan Quick did not play a single game in the 2024 postseason, But when it was all said and done, when the playoffs were over, from then coach Peter Laviolette on the way down, all the way down through the roster, on breakup day, the Rangers were devastated, of course, after losing this series. Almost everybody mentioned Jonathan Quick and the role that he played to get the Rangers as far as they did, 2 wins shy of reaching the Stanley Cup final. They said his leadership was off the charts. Talk about checking your ego at the door. This is a guy that's won 2 Stanley Cup championships as the number 1 goalie, 3 in his career. Was a Conn Smythe Trophy winner in 2012. And he just sat in the play. He didn't see a second of action in that Stanley Cup playoffs that year. It was all Igor, and should have been. Igor was the clear number 1 and played great. But who was the guy, the rock in the dressing room when things got tough? When Carolina was coming back in that second round series, when things got tough against Florida in the Eastern Conference Final, tougher in the Eastern Conference Final. So many people, from Peter Laviolette all the way down, pointed to Jonathan Quick. So what he did for this organization in 3 years really was invaluable. Now, I know there was a big dip in his play last season. And I thought, maybe he's getting a little bit older here. But apparently, you listen to the players, you listen to Vinnie Trocheck, you listen to Mika Zibanejad, you listen to these guys, what they have to say about Jonathan Quick. And the behind-the-scenes stuff never changed. The respect for him, he was such an important voice in that dressing room, trying to hold that team together. And remember, it was coming apart at the seams last season. But he was one of the guys, one of the glue guys. That's what Trocheck called him on Monday night. One of the true glue guys trying to hold that thing together. And then this season, he got off to the really good start. Rangers didn't score for him when the games that he started. So he had a, losing record early on. But he was playing really good hockey. Then you started to see cracks in his game. I thought late November into December, I was like, this is looking a little bit more like the guy from last season. And part of it is the Rangers, their defensive zone play wasn't so great either. But Jonathan Quick, you could see the cracks in his game. And that's why Igor's injury really came at a bad time. When Igor went down January 5th with the lower body issue, Quick stepped in. And now you're asking a guy who's 40 years old to not play once a week, once every 8 days, once every 9 days. That's kind of the schedule he had been on, but every other day. And, I know they called up Spencer Martin and, that wasn't pretty either. But that's where the season came undone for the Rangers. And I talked about it on last week's episode. That's why Igor Shesterkin and Adam Fox are the 2 most irreplaceable New York Rangers. We saw what happened when the Rangers were without Igor for a stretch. The Rangers cratered. And part of that was Jonathan Quick at his age. The compete level was there, the mind was willing, but I just think physically at 40 years old, that wasn't the role, that he was best suited for. And, the rest is kind of, history. When Igor did come back and Quick got hurt, but then his final 2 starts, he was better. He was certainly really good in that Detroit game at the Garden, the 4-1 win. He didn't see a lot of shots in the game. In his finale on Monday, 14 saves on 17 shots. I don't know what he does on the Samaskevich, goal. Can't blame him for that. It was a gorgeous, goal on a breakaway and, whatever. Cole Reinhardt buries a rebound. Then Cole Reinhardt, scores the eventual winner with less than 2 minutes to play, whatever. But nothing but bouquets to Jonathan Quick for his 3 years with the Rangers organization. If they can find a way to keep him within the organization somehow, some way. I don't know what the role is. Maybe it's in the front office. Maybe it's as a player development guy. Maybe it's, work with the goaltenders. Something. If they can find a way, if he buys into that, if that's something he wants, boy, it'd be hard to pass him up. He's a guy you want, in your organization. He's not playing anymore, but he's a guy you want in your organization. So there's that. Now, flip the page. And this is what I got to in my column at foreverblueshirts.com. Now you got to make a decision. and the Rangers must have been thinking about this for a while, and certainly they've known longer than we have known that Quick wasn't coming back next season. Obviously he discussed it with the organization long before he announced it officially on Monday. So the Rangers have had time to think about this, prep for this pretty much the entire year, right? So do the Rangers believe that Dylan Gran is absolutely ready to be Igor Shesterkin's backup next season? He was awesome. The 2 games he played in the NHL, God bless him. He was terrific. Number 1 star in each of the games. There was the overtime loss or the shootout loss to the Winnipeg Jets, and then there was the 6-1 win over the Chicago Blackhawks. And we'll see, if he gets the start in the final game. As we record this, it's before we have any word on who's starting in goal that final game against Tampa. You would think it's Igor Shesterkin, but maybe Dylan Gran makes the start. We'll see. But it's only 2 NHL games. Mike Sullivan has mentioned that a couple times, where people pushed him, asking him, why aren't we seeing more of Dylan Gran down the stretch? Now, Sully knew Rangers were out of it, but Sully knew, hey, listen, if my number 1 guy wants to play, especially because he missed a month of the season, we're going to play Igor much, much more often than not. And hey, we owe it to Jonathan Quick. I know that he's retiring, so I'm going to get him a game at the Garden to say goodbye, and then one final game to completely say goodbye in his NHL finale. And that's what they did. Of course, he couldn't say that at the time. But when he was pushed about Dylan Gran, he was quick to point out that it was a great 2 games. We loved it. And here are the things that I love about the kid. But there was a but. There was a but there. It was 2 games. So you got to look at the body of his work in 4 professional seasons. There have only been 2 NHL games. He's only 23. He was an AHL All-Star in 24-25. He was up and down this past season. Rangers got him at a good time. When he came up, he was playing his best hockey of the season. And listen, that was not a good team that he was playing behind in Hartford this season. But his best full season was his All-Star season last season. His kind of history, his first 2 seasons was inconsistent. It wasn't great. Hey, he was a young goalie. He was a young pro, first-year pro, second-year pro. But when things got ratcheted up, he answered the bell. He was outstanding. His best hockey, his first 2 seasons as a pro, were in the Calder Cup playoffs. He was terrific in the playoffs for Hartford those first 2 seasons. They didn't make the playoffs like the Rangers. They didn't make the playoffs last season or this season. They weren't as good. He wasn't as good for much of the season. Again, not a good team in front of him. But he started to turn his game around, and when he got his opportunity, again, a step up in play. When the spotlight was the brightest, Dylan Gran delivered. So is that who he is? He just needs that push. He needs those big games, so NHL games or playoff games in the minors to be at his absolute consistent best. If that's the case, man, you want him to be Igor's backup, right? But do you trust it? And if you're the New York Rangers, can you trust it? I think they absolutely have to sign a free agent goalie this offseason, a veteran. Spencer Martin's not the guy. Like, I do not want to see the 26-27 season begin and Spencer Martin is the backup on opening night. Okay. But I do believe Dylan Gran needs to be pushed. I don't think you just hand him this job. And listen, I like the guy. I think it'd be a great story. It'd be a success story for the Rangers if, kid that they drafted and developed, becomes Igor's backup, becomes a regular in that role at the NHL level. I think it'd be awesome. He'll only be 24 next season. But I think he needs to really earn it. Like he didn't play 15 NHL games and stand on his head for the Rangers here. He played 2 and was really good. And he's good. There's a track record of good and not so good in the minor leagues. And in junior, plenty of good. There's a reason why the Rangers had interest in him in the 4th round when they drafted him back in 2020. But okay, I make the argument that they need a free agent goalie this offseason, a veteran. Now, listen, we're not talking about Frederik Andersen or Sergei Bobrovsky, somebody of that ilk. I mean, they don't need a 1 and a 1A. They've got Igor. But they do need to make sure that they've got somebody that they can trust if somebody has to start a week's worth of games or Igor's out 3-4 weeks, like this season. Whether that's Dylan Gran, whether that is Dylan Gran and a veteran they signed this offseason, whether it's that veteran and Dylan Gran, in whatever order you want to put them. But they've got to make sure that they have that insurance policy. They thought they had it this year, or they crossed their fingers that they had it this year, but they didn't, as we saw with Jonathan Quick. This was it. He was at the end, and that was too much hockey, too much responsibility for a guy, a great player, future Hall of Famer, he was 40 years old, and he wasn't up to it. So, okay. So we need to go into who those goalies might be. Okay, we're already, discounting, some of the big names here, Bobrovsky and Anderson, they're not going to, Rangers aren't going to sign those guys. All right. This year, Jonathan Quick made $1.55 million, right? So you should be able to get a veteran guy for $1 million, 1.1, probably under $1 million too, to be your number 2 next season. Now, I know the Rangers aren't, square up against the cap, and that's not a concern for them. Whatever you're going to pay your number 2 goalie, especially if it's in that range. But they should have a cap savings next season on their number 2 goalie. If it's Garand, who's a restricted free agent with arbitration rights this year, he's not going to make more than $1 million at the NHL level. I'd argue he'll be, I don't know, $900,000 at the NHL level. That would be my guess. Maybe $950,000. I don't think he'd be at $1 million. I think he was at $850,000 or $875,000 this season, on his split deal when he played in the NHL, prorated. So they're going to save some money there. And what we're going to do when we come back from this break is kind of break down who some of those goalie options are for the New York Rangers that fit into, compete with Dylan Gran, but if not, be a guy that could be your number 1 in Hartford and be a rock down there for you if Garand is your number 2 up here. Or flip-flop, can be a solid number 2 here, has the experience doing that, and Garand continues to marinate down in Hartford next season. So we'll get to that when we return. And also a quick thought on Vincent Trocheck. Thanks for tuning in to the Rink Rap podcast. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Rink Rap. I am Jim Cerny. Thanks for tuning in. And as I said at the top of the show, thank you for liking and subscribing and following our podcast each week. And of course, we'll continue on throughout the entire offseason. Also, thanks for following me at Jim Cerny on X, or following us at Forever Blueshirts, also on X. And of course, reading our material over at foreverblueshirts.com. So finishing the thoughts here on what the Rangers should do in the offseason. They need to bring in a veteran goalie. And there are a bunch of them that are unrestricted free agents this offseason. No real sexy option. No option where you say, oh, yeah, that guy, right? And it's going to take good scouting and a little bit of leap of faith, just as they did with Jonathan Quick a few years ago. You remember Quickie, and I touched on this before. Quickie was coming off a Stanley Cup championship with the Vegas Golden Knights, but he was their number 3 goalie. That was probably the worst season to that point of his NHL career. And he played primarily with LA that season before the trade to Columbus and then got flipped to Vegas. But the Rangers believed in him. And then part of it was the pedigree, he always wanted to be a Ranger. There was a lot of great selling points there. And of course, he bounced back in 23-24, as we touched on. So the Rangers here are going to have to rely on some really good pro scouting. And by the way, congratulations to Kevin Maxwell, who's back with the organization as their director of pro scouting, a guy that I've known a long, long time. When I was the Islanders play-by-play broadcaster, he worked for Mike Milbury there on the island. Of course, he was with the Rangers for a long time, working under first Glenn Sather and then Jeff Gorton. But now he's back under Chris Drury, coming back over from the St. Louis Blues organization. So welcome back to Kevin Maxwell. Nice segue there. But getting back to it, yeah, so good scouting, some leap of faith. Who's the guy? Right? We discounted, the big names. Who might be an intriguing possibility? I don't know if he wants this serious of a pay cut. Cam Talbot would be an interesting guy to bring back. I know he's 38 years old, and he started 30 odd games this year, and the goals against was over 3. It wasn't a fantastic season for Talbot, and the Red Wings were a disappointment. They missed the playoffs again. That's 10 straight season now, just missing the playoff. But it'd be interesting if he would be, if that would juice him, that he'd want to come here, maybe take less money, but, kind of finish his career where he started his career. The thing is, if you bring in somebody like him, or if you like a younger option, like if you're sold on a Daniil Tarasov, he's an unrestricted free agent too. Rangers sure got a good look at him in the third period on Monday night, and he was at his best, that's for sure. Listen, I don't know that Florida isn't going to, re-sign him, but if the Rangers really, really loved, their scouting people love Daniil Tarasov, they're like, boy, man, would he be a great number 2 with Igor? Then what you're doing at the same time, there's no competition with Dylan Gran, in training camp then, because Tarasov's 27. So he'll be 28 next year. Gran will be 24. Basically, you're saying, all right, well, Dylan Garan's a minor league goalie, and he's a good number 3. He's a good number 3 option if somebody gets hurt. But, boy, we like Tarasov much more. That's not a competition. You're not signing Tarasov, I'm just using him as an example, to lose the battle. Like, okay, he lost the battle. Well, Dylan Garan's our guy, and then try and pass him through waivers and get him down to Hartford. That's not going to happen. So that's why I kind of write off guys like Tarasov and Vanacek, that are younger, but still unrestricted free agents, NHL experience, but not really guys that I view as number 1 goalies. But I think if you believe in Dylan Gran, you don't bring in guys like that. And you may not even bring in a guy like Cam Talbot, because listen, Talbot probably doesn't want to end up in Hartford either. If he loses the battle or somewhere along the line during the season, the Rangers say, hey, Talbot's not playing so well, let's put him on waivers. We're calling up Gran, whatever. So there are 2 categories here. There is, if the Rangers don't believe Dylan Gran is ready to be a number 2 or battle for a number 2 spot, then I think you go out and you consider a David Rittich, who I thought was outstanding with the Islanders this season. He's 33 years old. He's a veteran. He shared duties in Calgary. He was, goalie in LA. This year, he really, really did a terrific job behind Sorokin. Like, that would be a really good veteran number 2 goalie that probably, he made $1 million this year. Maybe gets a little bump up in raise, but doesn't make what Jonathan Quick made this season. Eric Comrie of the Winnipeg Jets, Connor Hellebuck's, longtime backup. He made, I think, $875 this season. Again, good. The 30-year-old, guy that's been a number 2 his whole career. If you're telling me, if the Rangers believe that Dylan Garan's not ready to be a number 2 in the NHL, then yeah, go ahead. Look into David Rittich. Look into Eric Comrie. That makes sense. But if the Rangers do think that Dylan Gran is at worst capable of winning a training camp battle, then I think you gotta change your thinking here. And then I think you focus on minor league goalies that are coming off good seasons, that are unrestricted free agents, that aren't going to cost a lot of money. They're guys that have been playing in the American League. They're going to be excited about the opportunity to come in and battle for a spot to be Igor's backup in training camp. But if they don't win the battle, Dylan Gran wins it, they go back, to being in the AHL where they were anyway. Well, what's so bad about that? And I'm going to travel with the microphone here. I'm going to hold it as I take a look. I'm looking at some AHL goalies that interest me, and I put some of them in my recent story. One is a former Ranger draft pick. What a story this would be. This is even better and probably more realistic than Cam Talbot, right? Brandon Halverson, former second-round pick of the Rangers. Obviously things did not work out here. Didn't work out really throughout most of his career. He dropped down to the East Coast, the ECHL, played a ton of his career in the American Hockey League. Well, here he is. He didn't reach the NHL until last season with the Tampa Bay Lightning, and he only played a handful of games last season and this season. But as their number 3 organizational goalie, boy, he was good. He's a guy that they trusted with some starts last season and this season. And this year, he's 30 years old now, 239 goals against, 6 shutouts this season, playing at Syracuse with the Crunch. He's an unrestricted free agent. That's the type guy that I think you like to get in here. Let him and Dylan Gran battle in training camp. Like, to me, that makes the most sense, right? Because Brandon Halverson's not guaranteed anything, like a David Rittich or an Eric Comrie, for example, would. He's not guaranteed anything. But he might be a really good guy even for a stretch, maybe to start the season. And Garand, goes down and plays his way back to the NHL, and from Hartford. If Halverson is, I'm just using him as an example, is, okay, he's so. It's interesting, right? So there are other guys that fit this mold. Caden Primo. He's in the Carolina Hurricane system right now, another 31-year-old guy with NHL experience with the Montreal Canadiens. He had a really good season, 246 goals against. He had 4 shutouts, 913 save percentage. Played for a good team, Chicago Wolves. But, a guy with NHL experience has played that number 2 role before in the NHL. A guy that you could bring in, training camp battle with Dylan Gran. If he wins the job, he wins the job. He's Igor's backup. Got NHL experience. That's great. If he doesn't win it, okay. He's our number 1 at Hartford. And he was number 1 in Chicago this season. He knows the drill. It's an opportunity for these guys. It's a lure for these guys. Halverson, Caden Primo, Phoenix Copley. He's another one. He's a little bit older. He's 33, 34, if I'm right. And his season wasn't as good as the others that I mentioned, but he's another option, right? Because he probably, he had more success at the NHL level, than, certainly Brandon Halverson or Caden Primo had. I'm just going through this list. Cal Peterson, Capo Kakinen. Like, I know that they're not super exciting options or names, but they do provide legitimate competition for Dylan Gran, so that Gran isn't just handed the number 2 job. But if Gran proves that he's better, okay, these guys, that'd be pretty good as our number 1 down in Hartford and as our number 3 organizationally. Or the flip side, okay, Dylan's not ready. We don't think he's ready. Didn't have a great training camp, whatever it is. And one of these guys with NHL experience at least starts the season as Igor's backup. So that's kind of my mindset on what the Rangers need to do with their goaltending in the offseason. Again, the big names, I don't think they're coming here. I don't think that they're going to go down the route of a Eric Comrie or a David Rittich. And if they do, then that tells you a lot about what they think about Dylan Gran moving forward. Okay. He's not ready, or he's never good. They don't think he's ever going to be worthy of being the number 2. It's hard to tell right now what they think, but certainly we will learn what they think once they make a move or two this offseason with their goalies. And again, as I mentioned, Gran still has to get his contract done. Remember last offseason, Dylan Gran did not sign his contract till August. I don't know what that was about. I haven't heard anybody ask Dylan Gran about that. Was it just one of those things, or Was there a hesitancy on one side or the other? Maybe his, because he didn't see the path, to the NHL. I don't know. It's worth asking for sure. So anyway, one other caveat, one other thing to think about when it comes to goaltending. There is a guy that will be an unrestricted free agent this offseason. He's a 2-time Stanley Cup winner, but he's had a ton of injuries in his career. In fact, missed most of the season with a lower body injury, playing in the Seattle Kraken organization. And right now, did not finish the season on the active roster because he was attending to a family matter, a personal issue. But when he did play, he actually did something that all these other unrestricted free agents that we're talking about, the NHL ones, like all the NHL names that I mentioned, not the guys that played in primarily or played all of this season in the American League, but all these guys, Tarasov, Vanacek, even Anderson, Bobrovsky, if you want to hit the big names, or Rittich or Comrie, not one of these guys had a save percentage over 90% this season. They were all under 90%. So take that for what it's worth too. This goalie, I think he played 5 or 6 games for Seattle this season. He did have a save percentage over 90%. And he was good with the games that he played this season. Of course, that's the issue. Doesn't play a lot of games. He's only played, I think, 7, 8 NHL games since 22-23. And that's Matt Murray. Oh yeah, Matt Murray. You remember him? Penguins goalie. Who's his coach? Mike Sullivan. Mike Sullivan's first 2 seasons as coach at the Pittsburgh Penguins, they won the Stanley Cup championship. That first season, 15-16, he started the year coaching Scranton Wilkes-Barre, if you remember, in the minors. His goalie there was Matt Murray. When Marc-Andre Fleury got injured after Sully took over the Penguin job, Matt Murray got called up. Matt Murray carried them to a Stanley Cup championship as a rookie before really his first rookie season in the NHL. It's kind of a wacky thing. First full rookie season. And then won the Stanley Cup the next season as well. There are so many reasons for the Rangers to be scared off by Matt Murray. So many. Health reasons. He just hasn't been able to stay healthy, stay on the ice. But there is the Sully factor. Would they give him a minimum contract, 1-year contract? Would they just invite him to camp? See, a camp invitee. Oh, like Connor Sheary, who ended up, he had the relationship with Sully. I know he's a forward, not a goalie, but he had the relationship with Sully, 2 Stanley Cup championships together, earned his spot in training camp, and has been here the entire season since, much to your chagrin, because so many of the Ranger fans are so pissed off about that. Would it piss you off if they brought Matt Murray in just to compete? Invite? Maybe it's a 1-year deal. I mean, Murray's played in the minor leagues, these last few years. He's doing whatever it takes to try and get back to the NHL. That's really where I leave it. We'll see. I think it's a fair question for Mike Sullivan and Chris Drury. Is this a guy that they'd have interest in? And maybe the answer is no. Sully knows. Oh, listen, he's not what he was, and all those injuries. And yes, he's a champion and all that, but yeah, no. Maybe that's the case. Anyway, we're thinking about, right? Another quick thing to think about. It had nothing to do with goalies. It has to do with Vincent Trocheck. He didn't seem happy. Would you agree with me? He doesn't do a lot of the post-game interviews anymore. That used to be his thing. He was a go-to guy. Pre-game, post-game, media went to Vincent Trocheck. Good, honest takes. A leader, a clear leader in the room, like a trusted voice and opinion. He makes himself scarce these days. Of course, Rangers tried to trade him before the deadline. Didn't get the package they wanted, so they held on to him, even though they held him out of a game, and he prepared his family for a move mid-season or late season at the trade deadline. since all that passed, has he seemed like the same guy? And I guess even leading into the trade deadline where he talked about, he envisioned playing for another team. He knew he's at least 1 foot out the door. And he didn't get traded, and he's still here. I don't think he's upset necessarily by that. I don't know. He just doesn't seem happy. I don't say he's not playing hard. I mean, Sully's still playing him, 22 minutes a night. He probably gets more ice time. I think he does. He averages more ice time than any other Ranger forward, more than JT, more than Mika, more than Lafreniere. He's still taking all the big face-offs. He's still, playing both specialty teams. And of course, in, his regular even strength role, and I think he's still playing hard. I don't know. He just doesn't stand out there as well. And he doesn't look happy. It's hard to put my finger on it. It's kind of like I felt about Mika last season. He just wasn't happy. Maybe it was more obvious with Mika. And maybe I'm reading into body language and, he's not talking to the media that much. Maybe he's avoiding the media because he doesn't want to talk about, get asked about, do you think this is your final stretch with the Rangers? Are you thinking about what's going to happen in the offseason? Maybe he's just sick of that garbage, doesn't want to talk about it, so he doesn't make himself as available. But I don't think he's happy. Johnny Lazarus and I talked about this a couple weeks ago on the podcast. He's convinced Trocheck's a goner, and the Rangers kind of owe it to him to move him this offseason. We'll see what kind of package teams come up with. We know the Rangers want, at least a couple guys that can play in the NHL that are either NHL ready or are young NHL talented players already. They want back for Vinnie Trocheck. Let's see if Chris Drury gets what he wants. But I agree with Johnny. It would be really tough for Vinnie Trocheck to come back next season because then it's still hanging over his head all year. When that trade deadline comes closer again next year, he's going to be 33. He's going to be closer to 34. And, his family's, it's going to be weighing on him all year. Yeah, the Rangers aren't going to want to keep me. He's still a linchpin to the success of this retool or not. What they get back for him, there are fewer restrictions here than when they traded Artemi Panarin. Like, this is the home run they have to hit when they trade Vinnie Trocheck, and I believe they will. But circling back to the point, I think he'd welcome it. I don't know if he's checked out, where he's now envisioned himself being somewhere else, and he's just ready for it. He just wants to get past this year, which was, shitty year all around for the Rangers. I know it's ending on a little bit of a better note, but, it's a shitty year for a veteran. It's a lost season for a veteran like Trocheck. A season he's not going to get back. And he missed a month with an injury, and, his numbers have been okay. It just doesn't seem to be making the impact on and off the ice that he has in the past. But, again, we're not behind the scenes with him and his teammates and what have you, but it just appears that way. So anyway, that was my Vinnie Trocheck thought. Again, it's the 2 topics with a lot of subtopics in their podcast this week on Rink Rap. Rangers close it out on Wednesday in Tampa against the Lightning. They will try and win their 20th road game of the season. They've been failing recently at getting that 20th road win. If they do, that'll be 5 straight years, a franchise record, if they get 20 road wins this season. But really, not a lot to play for. The next big thing for them is season ends. How do the balls bounce? How do the ping pong balls bounce for the draft lottery? Rangers right now have a 9.5% chance of winning the draft lottery per tankathon. Or is it 11.5? No, they're 11.5% actually chance of winning it. The worst they could end up is 9.5%. So anyway, we'll be going through all this stuff ad nauseum in the coming weeks ahead. And of course, we will be hanging out and talking about all the key topics that come out of breakup day after the season ends and the Rangers clean out their lockers and the players are all made available. We'll see what comes out of that. We'll certainly hit you up with the podcast then, not to mention plenty of material over at foreverblueshirts.com. So enjoy the final game of the regular season, and we'll catch you shortly on the next edition of Rink Rap. Thanks for joining us. Cheers.